Okay guys, this is try number 3 to get this video recorded. Uh, yeah, I had I had a lot of problems with sound on the first 2 tries. So, anyhow, this is episode number 2 of our Nihility production series. Um, so, like I said, I had 2 other videos done, and one of the videos was done actually at the time that I was working. This is a video that I'm recording later. So, as you can see, I have a building in the background here that's been modeled, and I still have a couple other buildings that I need to get done. This converted church, I might do a video on that one all by itself because that's going to be a lot of modeling. Anyhow, so one of the purposes of this video was to kind of let you know that there's a renderer in 3ds Max, and it's been there for a while. And it is the Quicksilver Hardware Renderer. And I tried very hard to get the art renderer and the Arnold renderer to do the lines on the render. And unfortunately, my video card will not support the Arnold toon shader. So that left me with a bit of a problem. And I looked through a lot of tutorials trying to figure out what to do about it. I haven't really used Quicksilver that much. I used it many years ago for a project in school, and I don't think I've used it since. But it has an ink setting on it. It also has illumination with scene lights, which I have one scene light in my scene right here. It's a what the heck is that? A skylight. Yeah, it's a skylight, and it's set to just to white. And I had the cast shadows on, but Quicksilver doesn't really use that. So anyhow, Quicksilver does have the ability to render shadows and ambient occlusion, and use indirect illumination, so and do reflections. So this is what it rendered out. And that looks a whole lot like an animated scene to me. It does have the ambient occlusion on it, and obviously some of the dark ink lines aren't in this section of the building, but that wouldn't be too hard to add, or just maybe even leave it. I could use frames like this over the top of my textures, and set them to multiplier or some kind of screen setting where the ambient occlusion would be laid over the top of the texture underneath, the drawn texture underneath. And it's not perfect. You can see that there's some lines missing, not only on that building but on this building here. Those wouldn't be too hard to add in, and it would save a whole lot of time rather than trying to draw out all of this this background here. And the car itself looks pretty good. So I did render out a little video, if it would come with me. Okay, there we go. So here's what it looks like rendered out, and as you can see, when I rendered this, I did not have that building modeled. So anyway, and a weird optical illusion actually happens with these lines where the front tires of the car look like they're turning, but I have not animated any part of that car. The front wheels don't turn, but it's just a weird illusion where they look for a second like they actually turn the corner. So I thought that was just kind of humorous. Alright, so I do have some time-lapse of the building being modeled, and the other thing I wanted to touch on was the use of references. So back here, this little pink box, that is a 16 by 16 by 16 foot box. And I made that so that I could more accurately get the buildings spaced, and that was helpful. And then, and you'll see this in the time lapse, and I comment on this because I did a voiceover. This little box here is a human approximation, and I had started modeling this building before I built this little box. And reference objects like this are very useful to have, because when I was modeling the building, I actually was modeling the doors and stuff way too small. So, and I guess it kind of dawned on me while I was modeling that that I didn't have a reference. So you'll see me have to correct that error in the time lapse. All right, well, I'm gonna go ahead and let this go into the time lapse, and then I will be back afterwards. Okay guys, this is like at 1000% speed. So the first thing I did is I was fixing the ground planes. They were actually a little bit too low, and I ended up having to move the buildings up, and I also had to move the track on the car because the car was sinking into the ground. So that was the first thing I did, and then I started working on the sidewalks. So I was just getting rid of some of those curb cuts that I didn't want, and then adding in another one over here like I had talked about earlier. And then I found some extra polygons that just wasn't necessary for them to be there, so I deleted some of those. So after I'd moved everything around, I realized that the garage entrance was actually being covered by one of the ground planes, and that the other ground plane wasn't really for the sidewalk area. So what I did is I just moved them around and then cut out the necessary shapes for the roads. And then I ended up moving the parking garage around a bit. Yeah, there's a whole parking garage underneath there. So once I was happy with that, I moved on to the parking garage entrance because I wanted to model it a little bit more. Change the roof line, and then I started adding some depth to the roof so that I could put some shingles on it. And sometimes you have to go in here and make adjustments because it just doesn't extrude properly. And I had to cut it so it wouldn't poke through the other mesh that I had that was the building. So I deleted the roof since there was, actually I extruded it first, then I deleted it so that I could have a clean polygon to work with for the roof shingles. There were some stray vertices that I had to delete. So these are all pretty uniformed. I decided I wasn't going to try to like model different shingles, considering the fact I'll be adding most of the texture with a 2D program of some kind. It just wasn't necessary to try to yeah, it might not even been necessary to actually model the shingles, but I have a tendency to really enjoy, I guess, realism. So I will model these types of things out. but it looks pretty good in the render actually. So once I was happy with that, I actually had a script that I was using, and it's a building generator. And it's a free script that I found online. The only problem with it is that I haven't had much experience with it for one, so I'm not entirely familiar with all of the settings. And the other issue that I had with it is that it generates buildings in a much larger size than what I was wanting. So you can see that building right there is huge. I mean, just gigantic. So I kept trying to adjust some of the settings, got a little bit smaller building there. It was still too big. And even though the buildings weren't overly, well, they were still too large, but I really couldn't get them to look the way I wanted them to look. Like I said, I think it's just the fact that I'm not very familiar with that program yet. So I decided instead I was going to go ahead and model a building, and this is just me looking through reference images, trying to find something I wanted. I guess that's a building in Boston. That kind of led me down a rabbit hole to other buildings that are similar. And I found this one, and I kind of liked the architecture on it. Yeah, I sat there and stared at it for a while, just to see if it's what I wanted to use as a reference. So then I selected the building that's kind of across the street from the converted church to work on first. And I'm just kind of laying out a plan for this building. It's roughly 10 stories tall. I think it's around 140 feet. And then I decided I wasn't going to try to model the whole building, you know, as in that box. I decided I was just going to model one side at a time. And I didn't have, a sketch or anything that I drew, so I was kind of fumbling around here trying to decide exactly what I wanted it to look like, and then I deleted half of it so that it was easier to work on. And I decided to delete the other half instead of the one I had deleted. Honestly, I don't even remember why. So I started adding some details here that I was kind of working on the door that I wanted to put in there. And my mind kind of played tricks on me a little bit. I thought this section of the building, for whatever reason, I thought it was larger than what it was. So I'm doing a lot of modeling here. And then as I progressed on this, it was kind of cool looking too. I suddenly realized that I didn't have a reference for how big I was making things, or how, in this case, it was actually how small. That's what that box was for. That was a 3x3 by 6 foot box. So it was representing a human being. And I realized my doors were way too small. And I was going to try to correct it, and I ended up just deleting the bottom half. And you know, cloning it and then rebuilding the bottom half because the doors were just so small. This is why it's good to have references, though. If I'd been maybe not in such a rush, I might have thought about that in the first place, about making a stand-in model for the size of a person. So once I was happy with the doors, I went on and I started moving on to more of the details of the building. I wanted some of that architectural design. And sometimes you just kind of have to stop and think about how you're going to do something. And that's kind of what I was doing here. I had a certain design that I wanted, and I kind of had to think of the best way to create it without possibly creating even more work for myself. And really, that's you know, that's what this whole thing is just deciding on a design, and then figuring out how to construct it in the simplest way possible. To be honest, I wouldn't want to try to unwrap this model. I have unwrapped models that are this complex before. They are not fun. They take a long time. So that was part of the reason why I kind of wanted to mix the 2D and 3D designs to try to make things simpler for myself, since I'm doing this mainly by myself. The simpler you can make things, the the better it is. And here I'm just kind of working on the edge of the roof up here. So I was pretty happy with that, so I duplicated it. And then I had to go in and I had to weld the two halves together. And it was I tried to use the edges at first, and then I just went to the vertices. They were much easier to work with and weld. So now I made a clone of it, and I rotated it 90 degrees. And I had a little bit of difficulty trying to get these vertices to weld correctly. And what I ended up doing was just selecting them and then going into the top view. As you can see, they're just not wanting to weld properly. So I ended up selecting the two complementing vertices that I needed to have welded together, and then using the scale tool to draw them to each other and then weld them that way. And it was, I'm sure that there is some other method of doing this that would have been much faster and would have required less work, but I still got the result that I wanted. It just took quite a while, and I'm sorry if my voice doesn't sound quite as energetic as it was earlier. It is now past midnight. So, as you can see, it's just a matter of getting the vertices close enough and then welding them, and then moving them into position using the top view. So I pretty much just kept doing that, going all the way down the building. A couple times I had some of them tried to weld funny, so I had to go and correct that every now and then. I don't know why they were doing that, but also, it can be really difficult sometimes to find the right vertice that you're trying to move. And here again, I had a lot of extra polygons that I really didn't need, but I didn't want to delete them until I got everything connected. So I'll go back here in a minute after I get everything straightened out and delete those extra polygons by selecting the edges, and then it's control back, and it will delete an edge and the vertice that goes with the edge. See, and I was just straightening up everything after that, and then now I'm gonna delete these edges that I don't need. So I was pretty happy with that, and then I had the choice of how I'm gonna construct the other half of the building, and I kind of sat there for a little while thinking about it, and I decided to just kind of let that stew for a bit, and decided instead that I was going to adjust the windows a little bit more. I wanted a little more arch in them, and not so much of a pointed design. So yeah, I just had to select everything and add some more resolution to it, and then after that was done, then I had to go in and select all the vertices that I needed to move on both halves of the building, and then move those into position. And then I was stuck with the half of the building again, so I finally decided I was going to copy that corner and extrude it as a element. And then I rotated the building, made a copy of it and rotated it. And then I had to go in and delete the corners and put in these these elements. And I had to get them lined up so that they would weld properly, but really that worked pretty well. Yeah, it was a lot less time too, that's for sure. So after I was done with that, then I wanted to close off the roof there. So I just inset it, and then I extruded it down. And that, you know, I kind of decided that was good enough, because you weren't really going to see the roof anyways, at least not in this particular camera angle. And then I had some extra polygons on the bottom that were not going to be seen, so I just deleted those. That was pretty much it for the building construction. I was just doing a little bit of test rendering there. And then I realized my ground plane didn't go all the way. Okay, so hopefully you enjoyed the time lapse, and that was really all I had for this video. I did want to mention here that these videos aren't necessarily instructional. This is my actual production that I'm doing by myself. These are models that will be used in my animation. So if you have questions, please post them down in the comments, and I will try to answer them to the best of my ability. Or if I get a bunch of the same question, maybe I might even try to do a tutorial on it. But this is my actual production, so it's not necessarily instructional, you know. But if you have a question, I will try to answer it. All right, well, let's see. Like, subscribe, hit the bell notification. We have links to our Patreon and Facebook page down in the description. And hopefully I'll see you guys over there on one of those two pages. And yeah, hopefully you enjoyed the video. So we will see you in the next video, and I hope everybody stays safe and has a great day. All right, thank you.